breakfast cereal is ready. I simply added some apple cider vinegar and some honey, and we're good to go. So there you have it, folks. That's a blend of some quinoa and some amaranth, what they call superfoods. But where we come from, we don't call them superfood, we call them real food. Quinoa and amaranth are highly nutritious. And also the great thing about them is they are free of all these artificial additives and preservatives that you find in your conventional breakfast. Quinoa is very high in essential vitamins and minerals. It's got your vitamin B complex, and we also have some magnesium, very high in magnesium, and some zinc and selenium and so on. Likewise, the amaranth that was part of my breakfast mix is also very high in your vitamin B complex, and also your magnesium, your selenium, your zinc, your manganese, etc.
We are talking about a child that has an immense history, an immense experience. We are talking about a child then that was shaped by hundreds of thousands of years of evolution and history. We are talking about a child whose Egyptian ancestors laid the basis of Western foundation. I'm often shocked about how many people who will engage in a conversation about Egypt and are surprised when they realize that they're talking about a nation and an empire located on the African continent. Just to show how this world has played such games on our minds, that it plays such games until people can talk about Egypt, talk about its culture, never mentioning race, and never thinking about it in terms of its location. It's somehow disembodied and cut off from everything else. But yet this is the supreme African civilization, along with other civilizations. A civilization that taught the Greeks, and the Greeks, of course, ultimately teaching Europe itself. So we're talking about a black child that carries in its genetic structure, its orientation, the very foundations of what we call today civilization. So even though the current civilizations are quite questionable as to how civilized they actually are. So when we talk about the black child again, we're also talking about a child that has physiological differences as well, not just in terms of color. When you study evolution, you know evolution in part is concerned with how different species adapt to their circumstances, to their ecologies. By the same token then, we must look also at people as well. If we're talking about African people, we're talking about a people who, to a good extent, have existed in certain geographical regions, who've lived under certain climatic conditions and other conditions, and adjusting to these conditions and adapting to these conditions, represent themselves in their bodies. As I often tell my classes in psychology, you not only live under certain conditions, the conditions live in you. And so consequently, our experience as African people and the conditions under which we live is represented in our bodies as African people. So consequently then, the African body cannot be an exact duplicate of the European body, of people who've developed under different geographical and ecological circumstances. Consequently then, we'll have to look at the evolutionary history of black people, as well as the political history and social history of black people, as far as understanding the physiological development of ourselves as people and of our children. When you look then at the physiological development of the black child, you will note that that development is not an exact duplicate of the white child. In fact, the physiological development of the black child is so different from that of the white child and in advance of that of the white child until our children require a different nutritional chart to meet their nutritional needs. Their teeth do not grow at the same rate, their bones and so forth do not develop at the same rate, and that is they develop much more rapidly. They're going to walk earlier. They're going to talk earlier. Their brains are born in a more advanced state of development as measured by EEG patterns that are correlated with so-called IQ. These children then will exhibit patterns of development that require that we have knowledge of their bodies and let us know that we cannot just go read Dr. Spock some so-called standard physiological text or nutritional text and apply it directly to our children's needs. The types of diseases that blacks tend to develop, the types of weaknesses and so forth are related to the African experience, related to the evolutionary experience. When we talk about sickle cell anemia, we will see that anemia is related to the African experience. When we talk about lactose intolerance in a large number of our children, that is the inability for some of them to digest cow's milk very well, we can look at the evolutionary history of black people and see the relationship of that particular element, if that's what you want to call it, to that history. When we talk about the color of skin, we must recognize that the brain is developed from the same embryological layer as is the skin, and that the nervous system is developed from the same embryological layer as is the skin. So the skin is not a mere covering and not a mere something that is colored or not colored in some kind of way. But the skin, the material that composes the skin also composes the brain and also composes the nervous system. The melanin, which is used to color our skin, is also used in the brain as a neurotransmitter, and it is used to coordinate various activities of the brain. There's a great deal of research going on now in terms of melanin and how it is utilized by the brain. There is some belief that this melanin is in part responsible for the athletic prowess of black people and responsible for other brain activities that we don't have time to go into today. But all I'm trying to say is we have to look beyond the situation of color. I like to think, and when I talk about the development of black children, I'm talking about a situation of where our children are able to do things and to exhibit behaviors on the very first and second days of life that it takes the European child some month and a half or more to develop. In some 60 indexes of behavioral potential and behavioral exhibitions, the black child comes out ahead of the European child significantly in its development and growth. So again, we need to look at that, and a part of it appears to be related to the melanin content of the black skin and the black body itself. Now, I'd like to see then and I guess from one point of view, the walking and talking early of these black children as representing the early walking and talking of black man on this earth. The psychomotor activities of the black child representing the coordination of the black man on this earth at the very beginnings of human history. And just as this child is going to walk and talk and do other things early, we see the black man laying the foundations of civilization early as well in pre-dynastic Egypt and other civilizations. Another thing that differentiates this black child, of